Hi, hello and welcome to today's class on English for Banking. So let's get started as usual with a book suggestion. Today we will be discussing The Rosie Project. It's a debutante novel by Graeme Simpson. For a change, this is a book by an Australian author. I know that not many people from Australia come up, they don't really feature in book suggestions, author suggestions. This is very contemporary, by the way. So the Rosie Project is something that happens, in our own time frame. So unlike Sherlock Holmes, unlike To Kill a Mockingbird, and all those books that were set in the past, okay, they were also written in the past, of course. Rosie Project is something that all of us can relate to because it's in the same time frame, okay. And for all those who watch the TV show, The Big Bang Theory and the spin-off Sheldon, okay. So this book, The Rosie Project, is something that is very similar to The Big Bang Theory because the lead protagonist of The Rosie Project is very similar to Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory. For those who do not know, Sheldon Cooper is a very highly accomplished, extremely intelligent, very nerdy researcher, okay, a scientist. And Don Tillman, the protagonist of this particular story, The Rosie Project, is a genetic scientist, okay. And The Rosie Project is all about him. Don is probably one of those, Asperger's syndrome survivors. So he has a lot of quirky, eccentric behavioral traits, and when you read it, it's brilliant to know things from his end of the spectrum, his mind, how it works, etc. Okay, so the Rosie Project is all about Don Tillman finding his, the love of his life. It's not exactly a love story. It's just beautifully written from someone who is unlike others. Okay, so do read The Rosie Project. Gurunath, hi ma'am. Yes, The Rosie Project is what we'll be discussing today. Good morning, how are you? So anyhow, just give it a shot. It's a very short book, by the way. So if you've never read a book in your life, and if you watch Big Bang Theory, this should typically be your first book, okay. And you would probably take one day to finish this book, cover to cover, end to end. That's it. It's a very short read. There is also a sequel to this. It's called The Rosie Effect. So do read it. Let me know how it goes, okay. Now we'll have a very quick recap of what we did in the previous class. We did phrasal verbs. What's a phrasal verb? Good morning, thank you. How about you, ma'am, Gurunath? Yes, I'm having a great day here. Okay, all right. So, what are phrasal verbs? Phrasal verbs are phrases that act as verbs. Okay, so I will make sure that you're all caught up on the subject. Okay, now catch up. That is a phrasal verb. Okay, I've used it in the past tense. What does catch up mean? Another phrase that means the same is bring you up to speed. Okay, so it means that I give you all the information pertaining to the subject, giving you whatever you need to know, whatever has happened till this moment. Okay, so a phrasal verb is a phrase that stands in place of a verb. It acts like a verb. Gerund is an ing noun. Okay, so if you append ing to a verb, typically it can be used as a noun, and that is a gerund. Swimming is a hobby of mine. I like running. So all of these are gerunds. Infinitive is the base form of a verb: to get, to buy, to run, to swim. Yeah. So gerunds, you said, verbs used as nouns. Yes, Gurunath. Thanks for remembering that. Okay, Vishaka, good morning. Hi, good morning. Okay, so last CPP. So I wanted you to have an idea of RC passages even before we started learning them, okay, so that you have an idea about what to expect. Okay, tomorrow we will be doing RC passages. That would be our introduction class. Nevertheless, let's get started on this particular question. Now, before I go to the question, look at this. When there was a large number, okay, 1 minute. When there were large numbers involved or the clerical workers were the only unorganized group in a jurisdiction, these workers were often clubbed into multi-occupational unions regardless of the workers' initial receptivity. Okay. Now, this is a data matching question. Quite a few of you have gone wrong with this particular question. I have marked that in the previous slide. Okay. Look at this, before 1975. This is the time frame. Chronology is very important in RC. Okay. Then, which of the following statements did not factor as a consideration when unions approached a certain group of clerical workers? Look at D, interest of clerical workers. It is a data matching question. All you need to do is pick the answer, pick the right phrase from the particular paragraph, regardless of the initial receptivity, which meant that they were unionized regardless of whether they wanted to be part of the union or not. Okay. Now, I would like to tell you something about RC passages. In IBPS and other banking examinations, you would find that quite a few, not quite a few, all passages would be from slightly, economic, banking related passages, or to do with the society, with governance, etc. Okay. So, you need to cultivate an interest in these topics if you do not have one already. Okay. So, I would suggest that you read articles from The Economist, Business Standard, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, the Wire.in, and all these online portals, so that you familiarize yourself with these topics. Okay. All right. So, we move on to the goals for this particular class. Today we will be seeing modifier, comparison and parallelism. Okay. So, do you have any idea about modifier, comparison and parallelism? I distinctly remember that I spoke to you briefly about modifiers. Okay. So, any idea what a modifier is all about? Gurunath and Vishaka? So, this is a modifier. A modifier is something that changes, clarifies, qualifies or limits a particular word in a sentence in order to add emphasis, explanation or detail. Okay. So, look at this. I have a noun, let us say it is house. Okay. I can then append big house, red house, white house, or have a geographical indicator, house by the lake, the house owned by my grandparents, okay, so on and so forth. Now, remember that a modifier is additional information. Okay. So, it is optional, it is not mandatory, it is something that you add to what is already there. So, even if you remove the modifier, you should be in a position to club everything else together and form a complete grammatically correct sentence. Okay. So, modifier typically is a descriptive word. Here big, red, white, okay, those are descriptive words. These are adjectives. Okay. Big house, red house, white house, or adverbs. Okay. Then you have modifier phrases. Phrases by the lake is a phrase. Okay, the house by the lake, the house on the prairies. Okay, so this is a phrasal modifier. Then you have adjective clauses and adverbial phrases. Okay, now adjective clauses: owned by my grandparents. Okay, what is the difference between a a phrase and a clause again? Quick recap, we've already done this and in detail, if I remember right. Okay, a phrase is a bunch of words that give you a certain meaning. Okay, when does a phrase become a clause? When it has its own subject and verb. Okay, so the house by that was owned by my grandparents. Okay, owned by my grandparents, the verb, the subject of this is that refers to the house. Okay, so any issues there? All right, then coming back to modifiers, they tend to describe adjectives and adverbs. That's also there. Okay, so whatever describes an adjective, remember, is an adverb. So these are modifiers. A quick recap of what we've seen so far about modifiers. One, they are completely optional. Even if you remove the modifier, the sentence should make sense. Okay, it's additional information. Second, a modifier, it changes or it adds some quality to the particular noun that it modifies. 3, it can be a single word. Big house, red house, white house. Big, red and white are single words, typically adjectives or adverbs. Okay, then modifier phrases, they are phrases, a group of words. Then there are clause modifiers. Okay, so these are how you modify or add a modifier to a word. All right, then let's look at a few examples. Now read this sentence: Sarah was a sure fit for junior prom queen. Here, sure is a modifier. Yeah, but look at this, this is very crisp. When you want to give some background information, modifiers are what comes to the come into the picture. Okay, then you say the blonde girl named Sarah. Okay, so for Sarah here, you add this modifier and say blonde girl named Sarah. Okay, so this is a clausal modifier, blonde girl named. Then who was a foreign exchange student from England? Another modifier. Okay, clausal modifier, who was a foreign exchange student from England, quickly climbed the ladder of popularity during her junior year. Another modifier, smiling her way through cheerleading and as an ASB presidency term, she inched near the top and was a sure fit as junior prom queen. So this one sentence that reads like a news headline can be expanded to something like this. So what's the deal with modifiers? Why do we have modifiers in the first place? Anyone? So it adds to the beauty of the language. Number one, modifiers. Remember that without modifiers, your language, whatever book you read, whatever article you read, whatever you speak, whatever you hear others speaking, would become very dull and mundane. Okay, so in order to have some amount of information in the first place, sometimes this is much needed information. For example, look at this. Paint the Ford. I say, go to the garage, paint my Ford. Okay, maybe I have two cars there. Okay, a Ford and an ABC, a Volkswagen. Okay, so remember that I need to indicate which one is to be painted. Okay, so in that case, modifiers become very necessary. Okay, so this is very important because quite a few of your exercise questions will be testing you on modifiers, misplaced modifiers, dangling modifiers, I've given you a brief on dangling modifiers and misplaced modifiers in my earlier classes. Gurunath, do you remember them? Phil's attributes about the person. Yes, if you are describing a person, yes, that's exactly what a modifier does, Gurunath. Very good. Now we look at misplaced modifiers. Okay. Look at this. They bought a car for my sister. They call pumpkin. Okay. Now you intend saying the car is called pumpkin. Okay. This takes a human brain to figure it out, correct? But the way it's framed, they've placed it such that the sister is being called pumpkin. That's the import of the sentence, okay? Which is clearly not the case. The car is called pumpkin, the sister is definitely not called pumpkin. Well, unless of course that's what she's called at home. But the probability of that being true is very less, okay? So it is safe for us to assume that the car was pumpkin, not the sister. Look at this. They bought a car, they call pumpkin, for my sister. So this is the right form. This has a misplaced modifier, okay? Now, they call pumpkin is the modifier for car. So right after car, you need to have they call pumpkin. For my sister comes after, okay? So this is a clear-cut case of misplaced modifier. Look at this. Only Jessica wants pizza. Then there is Jessica wants pizza only. Only is, okay, what is only? Is that an adjective or an adverb? Gurunath means for the sister. So tell me, is only an adjective or an adverb? I'll leave that for you to decide. Okay, get back to me on the commenting forum. Now look at this, only Jessica wants pizza. This means that only Jessica and no one else wants pizza. And then you say Jessica wants pizza only. This means to say that Jessica wants only pizza, nothing else. Okay, there is a sea of a difference between these two statements, and I remember having discussed this particular example in my previous classes. I have eyes only for you versus I have only eyes for you. Okay, so the first one says, yes, I have eyes only for you, I want to look only at you. The second one says, I have only eyes for you, so my ears, my forehead, my hair, everything else is definitely not for you. Okay, so a misplaced modifier is one that is positioned incorrectly, so much that the complete sentence goes for a meaning change altogether. Okay, now look at this. I ate samosas at the party from a paper plate. Now the party, is it happening in a paper plate? Illogical and very improbable. Okay, so the samosas are from a paper plate. How would I rephrase this? I ate samosas from a paper plate at the party. Correct? Oliver had only eyes for Jennifer. Okay, now what's the subtext that you learn from this particular sentence? Oliver had only eyes for Jennifer. Yes, it means that his, I don't know, the rest of the body, rest of his soul entirely was for someone else. Oliver and Jenny are the protagonist couples from Eric Segal's love story. Okay, so if you have time, please read it. The first line of the novel is brilliant. Okay, so there are two books that have such brilliant opening lines. One is, I'll give you the line, try to figure out the book. It was the best of the times, it was the worst of the times. What's the book I'm talking about? It's a classic, by the way. Okay. Anyhow, so I'll let you decide on Eric Segal's The Love Story. You can have a look at the first line and then decide whether you want to read it or not. So this is about misplaced modifiers. Now let's look at one practice question. This again is something that we've already discussed in previous classes. Spiced with sumptuous sambar and chutney, comma, the waiter served me a fluffy plate of white idlis. Now ask yourself this question. What is spiced with sumptuous sambar and chutney? It's definitely the idlis. A Tale of Two Cities. Yes, Gurunath. Very good. Okay. So do me a favor and find out the first line of Eric Segal's The Love Story. I'll write it down for you so that you can, do your Google search if you are doing that. Okay. So, spiced with sumptuous sambar and chutney, the waiter served me a fluffy plate of idlis. Okay. So, obviously, the waiter is not spiced with sumptuous sambar and chutney. Am I right? Do you have any problems with interpreting that? Okay. So, I have told you that when you do not introduce the first, the subject of the sentence in the first part and you have a comma, ask yourself whatever comes after this comma should be the subject and whatever comes before the subject should be the modifier for that noun. Okay. Here the subject is definitely the waiter. Correct? Any problem with that? Remove the modifier. Read the sentence. The waiter served me a plate of fluffy white idlis. That's the crux of the sentence. Okay. Now the additional information, the modifier here is idli is spiced with sumptuous sambar and chutney. But if you write it in this particular format, you mean to say that the waiter was spiced with sambar and chutney. Okay. Now, unfortunately, a lot of us tend to make the mistake of using misplaced modifiers. This is a classic example. Okay. So, how would you rewrite this sentence? The waiter served me a plate of fluffy white idlis spiced with sumptuous sambar and chutney. Okay. So, this is how you should typically be writing this. Then you can also say spiced with sambar and chutney, comma, fluffy white idlis were served to me by the waiter. So, if I put it in passive voice, then right after the comma I get fluffy white idlis, and this is what is being modified with spiced with sumptuous sambar and chutney. Okay. So, any problem here? Anyone? Get this right? Because a lot of your sentence correction and spot the error questions will be based on dangling modifiers. Okay. Then we move on to the previous class contest question. None of you got this right, unfortunately, and I am quite surprised because we did this in class. Okay. Now, I told you that fish and chips is one unit. Scones is another unit. So, you are comparing two units. In case you are comparing two entities, the right option should be between and not among or amongst. Technically, there is absolutely no difference between among and amongst. If you can use among, you can definitely use amongst. So, it was a googly question. Okay. These are just the same. When you use amongst, okay, it's just that you sound a little more formal. That's about it. Okay. So, between is the right answer here. Between scone and fish and chips, Sherlock, what would you prefer? Okay, so between Sherlock and Watson, between Holmes and Watson, who's your choice? Robert Downey Jr. or Jude Law, correct? Yeah, all right. So the answer here is between, and with this question we move on to this class's contest question. Good luck. It's very easy this time because we've had a dry run for quite some time, so I decided to go with something very simple. Any specific area to use amongst? Gurunath, it's just that if you use it very formally. Okay, for example, I remember teaching you the difference between below and beneath. Okay, this is more formal, that's about it. Okay, so some cases we just want to sound formal and we choose such words. All right, so we go to the next contest question. Good luck. Okay, thanks for the answers, Gurunath and Vishaka. We will of course be discussing this question in detail tomorrow. Now we move on to comparison. Okay, so comparison is very interesting. Remember one thing when you have a comparison sentence. Typically, how do you understand that it is to do with comparison? You see the words like, unlike, as, such as, and so on. Okay, so these are comparison operators. Okay, now I would like to compare a lot of things. You know what, today is not a very sunny day. Yesterday on the other hand was very sunny. So how can I put this in a very concise manner? Unlike yesterday, today is not a very sunny day. So remember that I am comparing one day with another day. That is very important. You should never ever compare apples and oranges. So they should be very similar entities, comparable entities in the first place. Okay, so comparison is always between comparable or similar entities. Okay, now look at this. Unlike Rob Stark, comma, Jon Snow's parentage was secretive, and Jon was never considered to be Ned Stark's legitimate offspring. Okay, now look at this. I have a person's name here. By the way, it's a Game of Thrones reference. Okay, so in case you haven't started reading George R.R. Martin, or if you haven't started watching the TV show, you probably should. Okay, unlike Rob Stark, comma, right after the comma, I have this as the subject. Now there is a reason that we've put modifiers, comparison and parallelism together. Okay, now ask yourself this. You are not starting the sentence with the subject. The subject of the sentence is Jon Snow's parentage. Correct? Any problem there? I can remove this, read this. Jon Snow's parentage was secretive, blah, 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 blah. That is a grammatically correct unit. Okay. Now, what am I comparing? What is unlike Rob Stark? I mean to say that Jon Snow, the person, is unlike Rob Stark, or Jon Snow's parentage is unlike Robb Stark's parentage. Okay, I cannot compare Robb Stark the person with the parentage of Jon Snow. Any problem there? Okay, so in this case you are comparing uncomparable entities, person with a person's something. How would you put this right? Unlike Robb Stark's parentage, comma, Jon Snow's parentage was secretive and Jon was never considered to be Ned Stark's legitimate offspring. Any problem here? How else can you write this sentence? Unlike Robb Stark, comma, Jon Snow did not know who his parents were and Jon was never considered to be Ned Stark's legitimate offspring. Any problem there? In this construction again, you have Robb Stark the person compared with Jon Snow the person. Okay? Alright, so that is about comparison. It is very similar to parallelism and your misplaced modifier. Okay? Now look at this. I prefer tea as most from my country do. Okay? The do here refers to as most, them preferring, as most from my country prefer. So this prefer and this do are very important. Okay. For example, I would suggest that parents raise their sons as they do their daughters. The do there is very, very important. It's a placeholder. Here in this case, it is prefer. In the example that I gave, it's raise. Okay, raise the daughters as they would their sons, as they would do their sons. Okay, so that's very important. We'll look at a practice question now. During some parts of his life, Smith, a writer. So remember that there is a comma and before the comma there is no subject. So the subject of this sentence is Smith and Smith is being modified during some parts of his life, blah blah blah. Smith, comma, a writer in self-imposed exile and in a similar way, comma, Truman lived a generation earlier, comma, leaving England and choosing to write about his homeland from a distance. Now you see that the context of the sentence is that Smith and Truman left their home countries and they were, similar in doing this. Okay, so they left their home country and wrote about it from a distance. But there is no comparison, rightful comparison. Okay, so A is definitely wrong because it repeats what is already there. Now look at this. Smith was a writer in self-imposed exile, close to the way that Truman lived a generation earlier, leaving England and choosing to write about his homeland from a distance. Here what are you doing? Smith was a writer, blah blah blah, close to the way. Way and Smith are being compared, very similar to what is happening here. Now look at C. Smith was a writer in self-imposed exile, somewhat as Truman. Somewhat as Truman. Do you generally use it? Let's look at the other options, then come back. Somewhat as Truman, who lived a generation earlier, left England and chose. Okay. Now look at D. Smith was a writer in self-imposed exile. A generation earlier, Truman was a similar writer in self-imposed exile, leaving England to choose. Now there is no comparison here. You eliminate the comparison. Okay, in this case, there is no comparative operator either. You have a semicolon, so you chop the sentence there and then you start off with something else. Now look at this. During some parts of his life, a writer in self-imposed exile, Smith was similar to Truman. So you are comparing Smith to Truman. Smith was similar to Truman a generation earlier, leaving England and choosing. Okay, so here the comparison is between two people. That holds good. Okay, so this is your answer. Now look at this, the somewhat as Truman. I am look at A, Smith, similar way. So Smith is a person, way is a noun, is something entirely different. So the comparison is bad. Close to the way, somewhat as Truman. Okay, so none of this have comparable entities. Only E has comparable entities, which is why you go for this. Gurunath has a question. What is this do there called? A do is not exactly a placeholder. When I say I prefer tea as my countrymen do, the do here refers to prefer, the previous verb that I've used. Okay. So next we come to parallelism. Parallelism is fairly simple after having seen modifier and comparison. Now look at this. All sentences that you construct should follow a parallel structure. For example, I like swimming and dancing, or I like to swim and to dance. Here we use gerunds. If you start using gerunds, you use gerunds throughout. Then, I like to swim and to dance. Here you use infinitive. If I have started using infinitives, I just carry on with infinitives. Look at this, I like to swim and dance. We'll come back to this. Then there is I like to swim and dance. One is infinitive, one is gerund. This is not parallel, so the sentence construction is considered incorrect. Okay, so you cannot have non-parallel constructions this way. Okay, now look at this, to swim and dance. What is the difference between I like to swim and to dance and I like to swim and dance? If you say the latter, you mean to say that while swimming you like to dance, you like doing it together. Okay, so that is contextually incorrect. So this is parallelism. You can extend it. I've given you very simple examples. We can extend this and come up with a lot of exercise questions. We look at one very easy exercise question now. The director attributed the stupendous success of ABC Corporation to both their traditional values and to the CFO's reorganization of the divisional income scheme. Okay. Now, when you have both A and B, that should be the structure. Correct? Any problem there? And A and B should be parallel to each other. Look at this, to both their traditional values and to. So you have 2 and 2. Okay. Let's look at how each answer option differs. To both its traditional values and to, okay, and the CFO's blah blah blah. So this is A, B is here. Okay, then both to its traditional values, and you should have another 2 if that's the case. That's not the case here. Both to their traditional values, and again the 2 is missing. Okay, so they are not parallel. So in all of these cases, that's the problem. C and D are eliminated. Now look at this, both to their traditional values and to the CFO's innovative reorganization, blah blah blah. Okay, so we are left with E and B. I would go for B, and tell me why I would go for B. Is it both to or to both? Now remember that the attribution is one unit. The director attributed blah 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 success to something. Okay, so the 2 here is actually common to I attribute your success to two factors, not I attribute your success both to two factors. The both two does not make any sense. Okay. So, B is your answer. Any issues here? To both. Correct. It's not both two. Okay. Good answer. Good job there, Gurunath. All right. So, we'll move on to a very quick session on vocabulary. As always, etymology is easier to tackle. Okay. So, now let's look at some root words. Bio means life. Okay. Then auto is self, phone, sono is sound, cis is cut, schism or CID is death, photo is light, vac is empty. Okay. So, we will be looking at the, what do you call, examples in the next slide. Scrib is to write, vis or vid is to see, video, vision, port is to carry, teleport, then sense or scent is to feel. Okay. Now, let's look at the examples. Biology. Biology is text on life, study of life. Okay. Then there is biography. Graph is write. A biography is something that is written on the life of somebody. Okay. The biography of blah blah blah. All right. What's an autobiography? Because we are also dealing with auto. Okay. If I write my own biography, it becomes an autobiography. If you write my biography, it's just a biography. Correct? So, auto is the root word for self. That's why. Antibiotic. When you have an antibiotic, it's with the express intent of killing some, microbial biological organisms inside that's causing some havoc in your system. Correct? So, that's an antibiotic. Then, these are the words with script. Script, as I said, is to do with writing. Okay. Script, movie script that's written down. Conscript, written down again. Transcript. Okay. So, when you do your UG in one university, you need a transcript from that particular university to be sent to your PG university. Prescription is what your doctor scribbles on a piece of paper and says, okay, fine, have these medicines, you'll be all right. Scribble, that's how I write. Okay. Scribe is someone who writes in place of someone else. So, there are blind students who cannot write their own examinations. There are people who are called scribes who write examinations for these blind people. Okay. Then we come to side or cis. SID is the root word for murder. Okay. So, suicide is, well, you all of you know, suicide is killing one's own self. Homicide is killing anyone else. Homo sapien is the word that means human. Okay. Homicide is killing another human. Patricide is killing one's father. Genocide, killing killing masses, a lot of people. That's what Hitler and the Nazis did. Then there is matricide, killing one's mother. Fratricide, killing one's brother. Sororicide, killing one's sister. Infanticide, female infanticide is something that we read about in India even today. Killing of a child, a just born child. Regicide is killing of a ruler, okay, a king. Insecticide, something that kills an insect. Then these are words that we've already seen, so I let it be. Auto is the root word for self. Okay. Phone or son is the root word for sound. Okay. Phonetics. You read the alphabet with the phonetic sound, how it's pronounced. Cacophony means a melee of sorts. Okay. A lot of noise. That is cacophony. Then telephone. Tele means distance, phone is sound. Ultrasonic. Okay. The device that uses sound to map your abdomen. Symphony or euphony, musical terms, okay. So, you know, it's a sound of music, okay. So, you just orchestrate a set of notes, form symphony or euphony. Then, CIS is cut, incision, surgical cut, scissors, concise, cut to the point, precision, accuracy, okay. So, that is about it for today's class. Quickly we will summarize. We have seen modifiers, comparison and parallelism, grammatical concepts, and all passport members, please right away you just you know, jump in and do your CPP questions. Your CPP is a set of 10 questions that we have put together. They are suitable for these concepts that you have learned today. So, please go ahead, do your 10 questions, get back to us with all your doubts, okay. Share it with others and get ready for your IBPS examinations. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.